We continue with a new Mishnah, and on the side of the Gemara you notice we have a nosei mivneh heading. There's a house shape that appears and a double underline. These are Tanai Ksuba, different conditions that make up the Ksuba marriage document, the guarantees given to a woman. And Dafilu lo kosvan chayov bahen. Even if these conditions were not written in actuality, he, the husband, is nevertheless bound to them. That they shehu tanai beis, because each one is considered a court-based condition. It's not a personal clause that each husband dreams up and writes in, but rather it's a pre-established court condition. Therefore, even without its appearing in the Ksuba document, it is binding. So as we skim down, we notice you have a house around Bon and Dichrin, a house marking around Benon Nukvin, and number 3, V'at is a reference to the Almona herself. So the first condition deals with children that male, Dichrin is the word Zechorim, male children that they have, and the second condition deals with girls that they have together, and the third condition deals with the Almona herself. So now the Mishnah. Lo kosav lo. A man did not write into the Ksuba the following. We're going to see where the double line underline appears. The next line, chayav shutnai beis, is chayav anyway. So what did he not write in? Bonin dichrin de yahavi lichiminoi. The boys that are born through us. When learning this Mishnah, bear in mind that we're dealing with a case of a man that will have 2 wives at the end of the day, 2 sets of children. So he tells his wife, he tells one of his wives, he says, and we say one of his wives, he tells each wife this thing, that the male children that we have together, inun yarsun kesef ksubosech yeser al chukahoin di'imachuhon, that eventually, and we're going to describe a case where the 2 wives die in the lifetime of their husband. So the husband is telling them that you should know that eventually, after he dies and had inherited his 2 wives, those properties that each woman brought into the marriage, and I must add, and those items that the husband had dedicated from his own property toward each wife, and they might very well be different amounts, but each woman is guaranteed that the children that she has with him, each group of children respectively, will inherit that which was written into their own mother's ksuba. So if we want to present things in a very superficial fashion, without there's much more detail than what I'm going to say now. But if you have Mr. X, the man, is married to woman A, and he's married to woman B. With woman A, there was a ksuba value of $100, and with woman B, also a ksuba value of $100. However, with woman A, he produced 2 sons. With woman B, he produced 10 sons. So the result of Ksubas Bon and Dikrin says that in the case of the 2 sons, they're going to be inheriting, as far as their mother's Ksuba, $50 apiece. Because there are only 2 sons, and their mother's Ksuba total value was $100. Woman 2's Ksuba was also total value of $100, but she produced 10 sons with him, with the husband. Each one will get only $10 apiece. That's a manifestation of this particular clause. As I said, there's much more detail than what I just said, but to give you a feeling of the ramifications of having such a clause in, I think we accomplished that. So even if it's not written in, it's binding because it's a Tanai based in. Another clause that is found in Kesubos. Benon nukvin dihavyon lichi minoi, the girls that we bear together. Yahavyon yasvon bevesi umitzinon minichsi ad tilochen leguvrin. They'll be entitled to stay in the house and derive support from my properties until they are taken by men, until they're married. Again, another example, something that the Gemara will add quite a bit of we'll say restrictions or qualifications of how this is to be applied. This is also chayav shu t'nai bezdin. A third clause, ate yasve bevesi umitzvah minchosai, you will continue living in my house and receiving support from my properties, kol yemei megal munusech, as long as you are in your state of widowhood, bevesi. Now the word bevesi appears in this clause twice. That is a point of importance later on. This clause, even if it's not written in chayav shu t'nai bezdin, kachoyu anshe Yerushalayim koisvin. That which we've seen till now is the text that the people of Yerushalayim used to write. Anshe Golil hoyu koisvin ka'anshe Yerushalayim. And the people of Golil followed that practice. Now here's another practice. Anshe Yehuda hoyu koisvin, the people of the Yehuda region. The Anshe Golil represented the northern part of Eretz Yisrael, and the Anshe Yehuda is the southern part of Eretz Yisrael. They would write, Ad she yirtzu hayorshim litein loch subasech. You continue, the widow, the lady will continue living in her husband's house until the heirs decide to pay her ksuba. Lefikach imrotzu yorshim nosen lo ksubasa upotrin alsa. Therefore, according to Anshe Yehuda, it seems like the yorshim, we can say, are in the driver's seat. They can decide, take the ksuba that you were guaranteed at the point of your marriage to our father, and goodbye. The topic at hand is, the opening topic is Kesubos bonen dichrin. Now, the Gemara gives us some background to that issue of the husband telling his wife that the male children that we produce, they will get your ksuba. Don't make any mistake about things. This whole issue is focusing on the women's respective ksubas. If this man dies leaving additional personal estate funds above and beyond the ksubas of his respective wives, so that property is inherited equally amongst all the sons. We had an example before of 2 sons and 10 sons. That man had 12 sons. The rest of his properties will be split equally amongst each one of his 12 sons. But here we're focusing on the properties that were written into the Kesubos of their respective mothers. And as we said here, the Gemara gets into the background to all of this. Omar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Mipnei ma hiskinu Kesubos bonen dichrin. Why was this made as an enactment? After all, a husband inherits his wife. And remember, we said before that this case of Kesubos bonen dichrin is predicated on an assumption, or on the case. At least our presentation was, a man had been married to 2 wives, and the 2 women died in his lifetime. When they die, the husband he inherits whatever properties his wives brought into the marriage. So and that's a given. A husband inherits his wives. Why was there an enactment that the children of each wife will inherit their mother's ksubas respectively, that which their father in effect inherited from them, from the women? So why was this established that it's that the ksubas are directed to the separate sets of children? Their own mother's ksuba will then be inherited by them. Answer: we we want to encourage men, fathers of girls. We want to encourage them that in anticipation of their girls getting married, that they will assign properties, assign wealth to their daughters. Just to read that line again, Kedei shikvoitz odam v'yichtov levito. The odam here is that we want to encourage a father to write over to his daughter as if she were a son. Umi iko midi de rachmona omar bro lerus bartelo terus v'osu rabbonon umisakni de terus barta. Is there anything that could be like this? So just to review what we've just said, the Gemara pointed out, in order to encourage a man to assign to his daughter properties, in order to encourage him to do that in anticipation of her marriage, a person will do that only if he knows that his grandchildren will ultimately benefit from that. And how do we accomplish that? By letting a person know that the sons that your daughter bears, they will be the ones to inherit those properties that you are now assigning to her. The Gemara asks, could it possibly be that the Torah says that when a man has sons and daughters, only the sons inherit, daughters do not inherit? The Asu Rabbanan Umesakni, and the Rabbanan come along and make a rule, or a tikkun, the terus barta. In other words, here we're encouraging a father to give over properties that his sons would have inherited upon his death. And while the father's alive, he's going to be assigning these properties, or some of the properties, that his sons would have inherited to his daughter. So the Gemara says, Honami doraisahu. This takana is also within the realm of the Torah's concept. How do you figure that? Dichtiv Chu noshim v'lidu banu muvanos uchu livnechem noshim v'ezbenoisechem tenu la'anoshim. There's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu which is encouraging parents to marry off their children. So the pasuk says, first of all, get married, have sons and daughters, then take daughters for your sons, and your daughters. And take wives, that is, women for your sons, and for your daughters, give them over to men. So bishlama bonim biyodei kaimi. I can understand when you're talking about your sons, talking about the male children, it's something within the man's power to get a wife. It's the derech, it's the way of men to seek out their female mate, their spouse. Allah bin say mi kaimen biyodei. The pasuk is instructing that for your daughters you should give your daughters over to men. Is it in a father's power to give his daughter over to some man? The man has to want her. He has to initiate it. What's this idea of a father giving his daughter over to men? So Hakomash Malon, the pasuk is telling me the following. The nilbisha v'nichsa v'nesiv lo midi, clothe her and give her properties, ki hechi dekapsi alo v'yosu nasvi lo, so as to serve as an incentive to menfolk to come and seek her out. If the menfolk know that this girl has along with her a bundle of property, it makes her all the more attractive in terms of marriage. So that this idea of encouraging fathers to assign properties to their daughters, even though those very properties are properties that their sons would have inherited, nevertheless, this idea, as you can see, is sanctioned by the scripture as well. the ad kamo, and how much is that? When we speak about giving over a father assigning properties to his daughters, how much? Abaye v'rova damri travayu ad le'isur nichsi, up till a tenth of his possessions, of his properties. As we go on in the Gemara, you notice a series of triangles. On the side of the Gemara, we have a mivneh, structural note, which features a triangle, and we've written Sidra Shel She'elois, a series of questions, Shehem Be'etzem, which are essentially Hatzois Chilufiois Ledina Kayim Shel Bonin Dichrin. Essentially, we have suggestions or alternative suggestions to the current understanding, to the current halacha of Bonin Dichrin. So maybe we should just state what the current halacha of Bonin Dichrin is, so that we appreciate the questions. The current halacha of Bonin Dichrin states that the respective sets of children from each wife that a man happened to have, when he dies, when the husband dies, so the male children of each one of the wives will inherit their own mother's ksuba. Whatever properties her father and the husband had assigned to that particular woman, i.e. their mother, her children, her male children that remain, they will inherit their mother's ksuba. What is their mother's ksuba comprised of? It's comprised of properties that her father, or we call it their maternal grandfather, had assigned to her in anticipation of her wedding, plus properties that the husband had assigned toward her when they were getting married. So that any given man, if he has two or more wives, so there are two sets of children that we're talking about. Each set of children will inherit their mother's ksuba, which, as we said, is comprised of their respective maternal grandfather's dedication plus their own father's dedication toward each one of his wives. And as we said, the amounts will vary, either in the amount that was written into the ksuba or the amount of children that the man produces from each one of his wives. So now the Gemara asks, V'ema, why not say as follows? De'av leirus, the properties that the maternal grandfather had dedicated toward his daughter's marriage, that is what is inherited separately by each set of children. Deba'al lo leirus, but what their father had dedicated toward their mothers, the basic suba of monomosayim. That's if the mother was a widow, so it's 100 zuz. If the mothers were virgins when they got married, they were 200 zuz. That amount is not to be inherited by each set of children separately, but rather that would be part of their father's estate and distributed equally amongst all the children. The Gemara says, well, if you're going to take that approach, Im kain av nami mimna velo kosav. If that which the children's father had dedicated toward their mother's marriage will not be inherited separately by each set of children, then the maternal grandfathers will not assign, they will mimnize, withhold, and not assign properties to their daughters in anticipation of the marriage. V'ema, well, let's say as follows: Hecha de kosav av lichtov baal. Why not formulate the halacha like this? That where a father writes a dowry over to his daughter, so then the din of ksubas bonin dikron will apply, and the father and their own father's ksuba will be inherited by the separate sets of children respectively. However, but if, let us say, imagine a poor girl gets married, and their fathers don't have what to give over to them, but the husband, he does assign properties to each one of his wives. But since the father didn't assign anything, so then the husband's own ksuba dedications will not be inherited separately by each set of children. The Gemara says no. Lo plug rabbanon. When the rabbanon established the halacha of ksubas bonin dichrin, they did it in an unqualified fashion, namely whether or not the maternal grandfather assigns properties to his daughters, the ksuba of each wife will be inherited by their children separately. The Gemara asks, Bas bein habonim nami tirus. We take a look at Rashi on a first line under the Gemara text, first wide line of Rashi under the Gemara text. Bas bein habonim tirus, kevon de taimo mishum nedunyahu, hecha de ein lo bonim mimena, elo yesh lo bas min ha'isha achas, ubonim min ha'acheres, Tito bas hayechido ksubas imo lirash nedunya shenosan avi imo my shno de tikun bonin dichrin. Imagine a case where the husband had left two wives, and one of the wives had with him only a daughter, and the other wife had sons. The suggestion here is that regarding the ksuba inheritance, that single daughter that he had with one wife, she should inherit her mother's ksuba. And yet the Mishnah says that no, that this halacha of mother ksuba inheritance is only bonim dichrin, male children. The Gemara answers, Kinachlo shavua rabbanon. This halacha of ksubas bonim dichrin is formulated along the lines of the rules of Yerusha, Nachla, inheritance. And the laws of Yerusha say that when a man dies leaving sons and daughters, the sons inherit, the daughters do not inherit. Question, Bas bein habonos tiros? Well, okay, once you say that the law of Ksubas bonim dichrin parallels the laws of Yerusha, the law of Yerusha says that when a man dies leaving no sons, just daughters, then the daughters inherit his property. So that imagine the following. We're talking about a man who had been married to two wives. From one wife there was one daughter, and from the other wife there were several daughters. So why not have the girl who is the only child from her mother? She inherits her mother's ksuba, and the other girls from a woman that produced several daughters, they inherit their mother's ksuba. And yet, we don't say that. The halacha was bonin dichrin. Dichrin meant male children. So why in this case are we not going to distribute the ksubas the way we just suggested? The Gemara says, lo plug rabbanon. The Rabbanan made no distinctions. When they imposed the halacha of Ksubas bonim dichrin, they said very simply that female children will not inherit their mother's ksuba. And to be more, let's say, focused in our explanation, just like we said that Bas bein habonim does not inherit, so too Bas bein habonos will not inherit. Continuing in the Gemara, the tigvi mimetaltali, concept or the translation of metaltali is portables. If we look in the Rashi on the let's say the fifth wide line of Rashi, the tigvi mimetaltali, kevon de taimo mishum nedunyas avi ho'em hu. Since the basis of Ksubas bonim dichrin is in order to encourage fathers to assign properties, assign dowries to their mothers, to their daughters. And Rashi makes reference to Avihoim. We're talking about the eventual grandchildren inheriting from their maternal grandfather. Aloma Amrino Leah, why has it been said before? We learned this on Daf Nun. Kishem Shenabonim Yorshim Elo Mikarka. There was a comment made which was obscure, and it had to be explained. Vukimno, and we explained that Biksubas Bonin Dikrin. The institution of Ksubas Bonin Dikrin states that when the father of these two sets of children dies, if he did not leave any real estate, any landed property, even a very small amount, then the halacha of Ksubas Bonin Dikrin will not apply, and all of the value, all of the properties of the respective Ksubas will be distributed equally amongst all of his sons. Only if there is real estate that this man leaves above and beyond the value of the respective Ksubas, then we allow Ksubas Bonin Dikrin to apply, to kick in. So here the Gemara is asking, following Rashi's explanation, why not allow Ksubas Bonin Dikrin to take place even if there was no real estate left by the husband, but there were portables that were left by the husband. So the Gemara answers, Kiksuva Shavyuha Rabbanon. The law of Ksubas Bonin Dikrin is like the law of the basic Ksuba. Now the law of the basic Ksuba says, Rashi says here, Kiksuba Shavyuha Rabbanon, Umetaltadli Lasmi Lo Mishtabdi Lishtora. Portables are not portables inherited by orphans are not a source of collection for documents that are left by their father. So if a man owed money and he in his estate he left only portables that were inherited by his children that are now called the Yasmi, the orphans, so the father's creditors cannot collect from those. And this idea of Ksubas Bonin Dikrin is viewed as that. And therefore, if the father did not leave any land, he left just portables of his own, so then the collection of the Ksubas Bonin Dikrin cannot take place. We continue in the Gemara. Titrof mi mishabdi. If you're telling me that Ksubas Bonin Dikrin is like the Ksuba, so just like in the case of the basic Ksuba, when a man dies leaving a widow, and the man had sold off properties in his lifetime, the widow can go to the purchasers. Those are we call them the Meshubodim. She has a lien on them. She can go to them and say, my husband owed me, prior to your purchase, he owed me my Ksuba, so I'm coming to you for collection of my Ksuba. So what the Gemara is suggesting here is allow the respective sets of children to collect their mother's ksuba from properties that the father, who in effect inherited his wives, had in the meantime, while he was still alive, had sold off. So let these heirs, the sons of the respective women, go to those purchasers and say, we're here to inherit our mother's ksuba. The Gemara answers, no, we don't do that, because Yarsun Tnan, the language of Ksubas Bonin Dikrin is, and you can see this language in the Mishnah itself. If you look back, we have a little arrow to the side of to the right hand side of the Gemara text. You can see above, where the opposite the fourth wide line of the Gemara, you can see that in the original language, the original Tanai, the original condition of Ksubas Bonin Dikrin, it said, Bonin Dikrin dihavun lichiminoi inun yarsun. There's the key word yarsun kesek subasech yeser al chukon dimachehon. The word Yarsun is Lord Yerusha, inheritance. And heirs, when they inherit their father's estate, they inherit that which their father left in his own possession. They don't go to properties that their father had sold during his lifetime. The Gemara continues, V'ema, why not say, Afal Gav Deleka Moisar Dinar? The rule of Kesubos Bonin Dikrin, we alluded to this before in passing, that the two sets of children will inherit their mother's Kesubos respectively only if their father, i.e. the husband of these women, had his own property valued at 1 dinar more than there's 1 dinar of his own property besides the property written into the Kesubos of the respective ladies. Now, dinar is not a lot of money, but there has to be a mosar. Mosar means extra, above and beyond the value of the Kesubos that father had of his own properties. If he had mosar dinar of land, then the halacha of Kesubos Bonin Dikrin will take place. If not, then, as we said before, all of the 2 Kesubos, if it's 2 wives, is pulled together and distributed equally amongst all of the sons. So why not say that Kesubos Bonin Dikrin applies even if there is no mosar dinar? The Gemara says, "B'mokum dekama akra nachla deiraisa lo tokinu rabbanan." In a situation where we'll uproot we'll uproot entirely Yerusha, the laws of inheritance as perceived by the Torah. How does the Torah perceive the laws of inheritance? When a man dies, all of his sons, even if they're from several different women, all of the sons inherit his property equally. Kesubos Bonin Dikrin is a very unequal distribution of properties. So unless we can show that with regard to some aspect of his estate there was equal distribution of properties amongst all of his children, if we can't do that, then there's no Kesubos Bonin Dikrin procedure either. And therefore, if we can allow the laws of Yerusha to manifest themselves on that mosar dinar of the father's or husband's own property, then we can say, so to speak, we fulfilled our Torah obligation of Yerusha on that small piece of property, the mosar dinar. And now, as far as the Kesubos are concerned, that can be inherited by the separate sets of children respectively, each one inheriting their mother's Kesubah. Before we go further in the Gemara, we have a topic heading in Osei. Rav Papa mechatein es beno. Rav Papa is seen in the upcoming story marrying off his son, umagia lebeis avi hakala, and he arrives at the house of the father of the bride, lahachin haksuba v'lirshaim schum hanedunya, in the house of the kala. So the ksuba will be written up, and they're gonna write into it the amount of the dowry. Yehuda bar Meimar mislavel Rav Papa. This individual, Yehuda bar Meimar, you'll see from the context of the story, is apparently an important individual. He comes accompanying Rav Papa, and his presence, Yehuda bar Meimar's presence, appears as a source of pressure on the father of the bride to increase the amount to be written into the Kesubah. If that sounds a little bit abstract, of course, we're missing the details. Let's take a look now at the Gemara. Rav Papa, Yasik le lebrei be'aba surah. Rav Papa was involved in helping to prepare the wedding of his son in the home of Abba Surah. Abba Surah, that is the name of the father of the Kala. Ozer lemichtav lo ksubasa. He went to have the Kesubah prepared. Shoma Yehuda bar Meimar. Yehuda bar Meimar heard about this. Nofak also Ischazi le. He came and appeared to him and they started walking together. Kimotu lepischa, when they got to the door of Abu Surah, have a komiftar minei. Yehuda bar Amremar wanted to take leave. He sought out the permission of Rav Papa to allow him, Yehuda, to go back home. Omar lay. Rav Papa said, Nei Omar Bahadoy, come in with me. We continue at the top of Daf Nun Gimel. Chazia the lo have a nichale. Rav Papa saw that Yehuda bar Amremar was uncomfortable. He didn't want to go in. Omar lay my daitoch. So Rav Papa says to his friend, he says, what's your concern? Mishum de Omar lay Shmuel Rav Yehuda. Are you worried about what Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda? Shinana, he says, wise one. Lo teheve ba'avuri achsanta. Don't be present when there is transfer of property of one's property. Afilu mibra bisha lebra tova. If you happen to be aware of a father who is transferring, reassigning in anticipation of inheritance, you might say in the preparation of a will, he's assigning. He has sons of different qualities. Bra bisha, an undesirable type son, and bra tov, a good son. So Rav Yehuda is told by Shmuel, don't be present when a father is reassigning his properties from a bad son to a good son. And you know why? The lo yadia, you never know. My zara nofak minei. If the father's goal is to withhold properties because his son chose a negative way of life, but one doesn't know what kind of grandchildren will come forth from him. In other words, one has a son that chose an undesirable path of life. If you cut him out from the inheritance, you might in effect be cutting out the grandchildren from wealth, and those grandchildren themselves might be quite desirable. So you never know. You never know who's going to come forth from whom. So don't play around with your estate by assigning more to one and less to the other. And as Shmuel tells Rav Yehuda, don't be present when you see the redistribution of one's estate from one in favor of the other. V'kol shekain, and you might reason mibra labarta, when properties are being transferred from a son to a daughter. When we said before that the laws of inheritance from the Torah's standpoint say only sons inherit, daughters do not inherit. And here we're going into a house where Abba Surah apparently has sons, and he's assigning properties to his daughter in anticipation of her marriage. So is that why you're hesitating entrance because of what Shmuel told Rav Yehuda? So Rav Papa continues saying, if that's your reason, but honami takanta de rabonanhi, this idea of a father transferring property from his son, in other words, anticipated property that his son would inherit eventually, and transferring it to his daughter, is also a rabbinic enactment. The HaRav Yehonasan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. That was what we featured in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who quoted Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And if you note the Gemara back on Nun Beis Omid Beis, this is what we saw at the very. You could see we have a corresponding arrow right at the beginning of the Gemara's discussion on the Mishnah. Back there again on Nun Beis Omid Beis. That was we explained that we wanted to encourage men to marry women, and how does a father see to it that takes place? By assigning properties to his, assigning a nice, generous dowry to his daughter. So, come in, says Rav Papa. Omar lay. We continue in the Gemara. So Yehuda bar Amremar says, Hani mili midate. That's all fine and good when the father is acting on his own. La'asuye nami, but to force a father to give something that he might not want to give over to his daughter, is that also desirable? Amar Leis, Rav Papa said, Otomi koamino loch de oil ve'asi, did I say come in and force him? Oil velota say come in. I said come in and don't say anything. Don't force him. Just come in and sit quietly. Just be with me. Amar Leis, so Yudah bar Meimar says, Maloi didi hainu ase, my mere entrance to the house, my entering with you, that itself will be a source of undue pressure, whereby the father Abba Surah will add because of my presence here, because out of honor to me, so he'll add more money to his daughter more than he would have assigned otherwise. Achbei v'oil ishtik v'yosiv. Nevertheless, Rav Papa prevailed upon Yudah bar Meimar. He entered, remained silent, and sat down. Sovar, now Abu Surah sees his Mechutin's friend, that's Rav Papa's friend, Yudah bar Meimar, sitting there, remaining silent. Sovar ihu mirsach rosach, and Abu Surah thought that his silence is a sign of anger. In other words, that the anger that Abu Surah is not writing enough into the Kesubah. So Abu Surah felt intimidated. He wrote everything that he owned to his daughter. L'sof Omar Lei, afterwards he said, Hashto nami lo mishtoi mar. That's Abu Surah saw that Yudah bar Meimar kept quiet. He says, "What? You're still silent. Chay demor lo shviki milav shoy. By your life, he swore I didn't leave for myself anything." Omar Lei, Yudah bar Meimar responds, "Imi noi didi. If you would have asked me for an eitzah, for counsel, afilu hainami de kasvis lo nichol. Even that which you wrote in is I'm not comfortable with it." Omar le hashtanami adabi. So should I now back out? It seems if I can add my own interpretation, it seems that when Yudah bar Meimar says, if you would have asked me, even that which you wrote in, it seems that even that which you wrote in initially, I wasn't happy with that. Maybe it could have been less and it would have been fine too. So Abu Surah says, should I back out now? Should I subtract, reduce that which I assigned? I'm like, no, don't do that now. Shavya nafsho hadrana lo kamina. To make yourself into a hadrana. Hadrana is someone who backs out. He gives and takes back. That's not a proper thing to do. I'm not suggesting that you make yourself into a hadrana. So you can see here the significance in this sugya of the Kesubos Bon and Dikrin, and how all of this is designed to encourage marriage, encourage men to seek out wives because they're coming into the marriage with additional funds, making them more attractive as mates, and all of this in the interest of assuring the development of Jewish families, of the next generation.